Have you guys noticed something different about Apple lately? They're kind of being the good guys. With iOS 18, they let me move my home icons around. What kind of freedom is this? The Apple I know and love would never have allowed me to do that. In all seriousness, Apple has made some surprisingly pro consumer moves in the past year that seem quite out of character. After a decade of using the same Lightning port connector, they switched to USB C. After stringent control over the replacement of computer parts, they've launched a self repair program. And most striking to me, instead of keeping communication between iPhones and Androids in the dark ages with SMS, they've added support for RCS, or Rich Communication System. You can now send videos between devices without turning it into a pixel sledge. Hey, even the infamous Apple Mouse is looking like it's headed for change. So, what would cause a company worth $3 trillion to start changing their attitudes? Do we really think that Apple itself is fundamentally changed? No, I don't think that. I think Apple is merely responding to environmental pressures. As some of you probably already know, in 2022, the EU passed legislation requiring electronics makers to use USB-C on their devices by 2024. Now, this obviously explains Apple's Lightning transition on the iPhone, but I think this event holds a higher significance in and of itself. This marks the start of a barrage of government regulation on the tech sector. Let's do a quick run through of the major legal events in the past few years. After the EU regulation back in 2022, the FTC and DOJ launched lawsuits against Meta and Google in 2023, both of which took aim at anti-competitive and antitrust violations that these companies had. Later in that year, the FTC again sued Amazon for illegally maintaining a monopoly. In 2024, it really starts to heat up. In March, the EU fines Apple for $2 billion. In September, Google lost their own separate lawsuit against the EU for $2.7 billion. In November, the US DOJ filed an antitrust case against Apple. Also in November, Australia passed a social media ban for children under the age of 16. The European Union, the United States, and even Australia way down there are coming after big tech. I think Apple sees what's rolling down the mountain and decided not to wait and let it hit them. As a result, they are loosening the rules on things like RCS, device repairability, and home screen icons to try to prevent regulators from coming after them again. Would you rather face $2 billion in fines or release features you were waiting to announce in iOS 27? Apple's decided they would rather do the latter. One advantage of being proactive in their approach to regulation is they get to set the new rules. Take Apple's self-repair program, for example. The program allows third-party users and establishments to officially repair their iPhones when they break. This sounds great, but when they initially launched the program back in April 2022, they implemented a restriction called parts pairing that made it particularly difficult for third-party repair shops. Parts pairing requires that new devices must be specifically assigned to a certain device in order for them to work. So let's say I smashed my new iPhone screen. I couldn't just walk into a random repair shop and think that I'll get a good as new phone back the same day. I would have to wait for the shop to order and receive a new screen for that specific phone, a process that will take at very least multiple days. And at that point, you might as well just send your phone directly to Apple, which is exactly what they want you to do. Luckily, though, parts pairing is being phased out after significant backlash, but I think this example shows why Apple would rather initiate change now. Instead of being told by governments around the world exactly what they need to do and how to do it, they have the chance to come up with their own terms that favor themselves, which is absolutely valid. Another more minor reason that Apple might be changing some of its actions is consumer pressure. Smartphones in general definitely aren't making the same leaps and bounds in technological progress as they once were. So to have any significant software or hardware advantage is a big differentiator. I mean, after 17 years of not being able to move the settings app around, I would consider to switch if I was an iPhone user. And Apple realizes this. By eliminating these minor differences between iOS and Android, like customizability, repairability, and a more open ecosystem, you make it hard for Android to win people over. This combined with significant regulatory pressure, it's no wonder that Apple is acting differently. Overall, I think this is a positive change. Consumers like you and I reap the benefits of having companies like Apple held accountable for their not so good choices, even if they do come with some caveats. Personally, I hope to see this trend continue. The EU and Australia show no signs of stopping. Just this month, the EU started probing an alleged Google Meta ad agreement targeting teens. However, in the US, we may see a change in pace. With a different presidential administration incoming in 2025, we will likely see a change in leadership among the governmental departments. Leela Khan, who is currently the chair of the FTC, has been instrumental in many of the US's actions. With her likely replacement, it will be hard to predict what will happen in the future. But nevertheless, I hope you can see why Apple is acting the way that they are and how it affects you.